Louis, thank you so much for joining us, especially for your first time with us in the First Person program, although you've been speaking about what you experienced during the Holocaust for many years.
Yeah.
You have such a short time with us, so much to tell us. We're going to start right away, if that's okay, Louis. While World War II started with Germany's attack on Poland in September 1st, 1939, the war's full impact on your country, on you and your family, began with Germany's invasion of the Netherlands in May of 1940. Before you talk to us about what happened to you and your family during the war, during the Holocaust, tell us a little bit about your family and you in the years before the war.
Well, we were a happy family. We enjoyed it. Arnhem had a lot of parks. We enjoyed going there. My sister and I participated in many activities. We used to go to a swimming pool. We were members of an organization that always had activities on Sundays. So we were a happy family.
I was struck when you told me, Louis, that you said you were a close and happy family. You said there were rules, but they were good rules. Will you say a little bit about that?
Well, you know, the rules of behavior.
To do the right thing, right?
Do the right thing,
To do the right thing. You told me that your sister Rachel, whom you called Shelley, was like a second mother to you in some ways. Will you say a little bit about that?
Well, she was. She was 2 years older than me, and she would, for instance, tell me, you have to save your allowance because there's a birthday coming. You have to share in the cost of the presents. And she would pick out the presents.
And make sure you contributed.
And make sure I contributed, yes.
How large was your extended family?
Oh, my mother had 3 sisters who spoiled me. Mm-hmm. So then my father had 4 brothers and a sister who spoiled me too.
Spoiled you too. And you said you had many cousins.
And then we had many cousins, yeah.
After the Nazis came to power in Germany in 1933, as we noted earlier, many German Jews fled to different countries, including the Netherlands. Tell us how your father helped those who were fleeing. How your father helped those who were fleeing from the Nazis in Germany.
Well, he brought them to our home where he would stay because I needed time to make arrangements, for instance, to go to the States to get their papers for the steamship company. They usually had the visas already. And so I was still very young, but my mother had to explain to me why these people were staying with us. So I understood what was going on in Germany.
Why these folks were coming through your house.
Yeah.
And one of them, Eva, who we saw in a photograph. Tell us a little about Eva.
Eva, well, when England decided to allow 10,000 children to come, Holland decided to have 500 coming to Holland. And so Eva was one of the children. She came from Vienna to Austria, in Austria. And she came to us, and her brother stayed with friends of my parents. And she stayed with us about 6 months.
6 months.
Until an organization had been formed to take care of the children.
And maybe we can, at the end, you can tell us, but she ended up surviving the war, didn't she?
Eva survived the war, yeah.
Louis, the war began September 1st, 1939. At that time, they would not attack the Netherlands till the following May. At that time, at the start of the war, did your parents or did the Dutch people expect that the Germans would then invade the Netherlands?
No, they never expected it.
They did not expect it?
Never. Holland had been neutral in the First World War. As a matter of fact, it is said that Hitler did that the day before before they attacked Holland, and they never would attack Holland.
The day before.
Yeah.
When Germany did, the next day after he said that, attack Holland on May 10th, 1940, what do you recall of the German invasion, and what did it mean for you and your family immediately once they came in?
Well, about 4 in the morning, there were dogfights overhead of airplanes, and my parents realized it was war. We tried to get to the west part of the city, of the country, to the ports in order to leave the country. But we were too late. The army had already broken some dikes to flood areas, and they had dynamite trees across the street, the roads, so we couldn't get through.
So everything's blocked?
Everything was blocked.
Yeah.
So we had to go back. About 10 o'clock in the morning, I remember the tanks coming in to Arnhem. I was 10 years old. I was fascinated by the beautiful uniforms of the tank commanders.
The beautiful uniforms of the tank commanders. Yeah. Louis, you shared with me that at one point, when they were first coming in, the local police warned people to open your windows.
That's right.
Tell us about that.
Well, the bridge over the Rhine River is in Arnhem. Became famous in 1944, but at that time they were going. The Dutch were going to dynamite the bridge, and the police warned because of the pressure to open up the windows. So we did. I was looking out the window. I got thrown back into the house when the bridge broke.
The blast blew you back
Yeah.
into the house. And also, tell us about once the Germans were there, some Germans wanted to come to your father's store.
Oh, yes. They came to the store. The store was open, but they saw items in the display cases that they hadn't seen in Germany for years, and they wanted to buy them. So they came and they wanted my father to sell it to open up the store. Yes.
But he didn't.
No.
No. And they left at that point.
Yes,
They
sure.
left at that point. Once Holland was under German control, you said that life was normal, more or less, until November, and that's when you went back to school. What happened beginning in November of 1940?
And November was the first decree against the Jews, and it was that Jews could not be civil service. Now it happened that a number of the universities were state universities, so the professors were civil servants. Mm-hmm. The result was that the students, especially in the University of Leiden, felt that this was absolutely inappropriate if it's happening, so they went on strike. The Germans punished them by closing the university, and the students formed the first resistance movement.
And of course, as we'll hear later, the resistance was so important to
That's
your
right.
survival. Yeah. As bad as it was at that time under the Germans, things turned far worse beginning in September 1941.
In 1941,
Tell us about that time.
they punished us by not allowing us to continue in public school. So which cut my social life. Now, my friends were all in public school, and so, not being able to continue was very painful.
You said it. You mentioned to me several things that were very painful at the time. Not being able to continue in school. You also said that Jews were not allowed to play with non-Jewish kids,
Oh, yes.
and their parents.
The parents said, you can come and play here. Don't mind the, commands from the Germans. But I was afraid. If someone would see me and didn't like me, then my parents would be punished. So I didn't go to my friends.
That was the end of playing with all
That's
your
the end
friends.
of the
The other thing that you mentioned that you said was incredibly painful related to your bar mitzvah.
That was, yeah. The week before my bar mitzvah, the Germans came out with a decree that Jews could not travel without getting a permit. But it would take 2 weeks to get the permits officers in order, so my bar mitzvah, not one of my relatives, could attend.
You said that was especially painful for your parents.
Yeah.
I know we're going to skip over many things that you could share with us during that time from the fall of 1941 to 1942 as the roundups of Jews and the deportation of Jews intensified. Your parents began serious planning for going into hiding with the family. Tell us about their efforts to prepare to go into hiding and what happened once they decided it was time to go.
Well, the way I understood it is that my parents thought we would be totally cut off from the outside world. So they laid in a lot of food, they preserved a lot of food, and they stored it with one of the neighbors. But the other neighbor, I mean the neighbor on the left and on the right, so one of the neighbors had the food, the other one, they made an arrangement to go into hiding there, and they bought some of our furniture and our clothing there. So when in November 1942, we were warned not to sleep at home. My parents thought this was time to go into hiding. Something happened. The neighbor who had the furniture and the clothing decided that they didn't dare or didn't feel safe to hide them. So the plan fell through. I never found out. But the thing is that they never saw the food either. So that's really what actually happened.
You shared with me very graciously a personal memoir you wrote, and in it you wrote in great detail about the extent of their preparations, and it was extraordinary, including items that your father thought maybe he could use on the black market if he needed it or to barter. But you said later your parents saw the neighbor who had the goods actually were using some of their goods for their own purposes.
Oh, yes.
You, in your memoir, you described your first time going into hiding when your father's, if I have this correct, your father's most trusted employee took you and your sister to the railroad station to meet your parents.
Yes.
Tell us about that. That must have been a frightful time.
But my parents were told by a policeman, don't sleep home tonight. So the most direct person they had to talk to was the trusted employee, had been with them for 10 years, and asked if my sister and I could sleep at his home. And he would go the next day and find out whether the Germans had come to round us up. Because what they used to do is, they used to put a seal over the lock. So if the lock was sealed, it meant that they had been there. So he went the next morning to look, and he saw that the lock was sealed. He knew where my parents had been sleeping, and he found them, and they said, bring the children to us, and we'll leave town. So we met at the railroad station. We moved the stars that we had to wear of our clothing, and took the train. And we're lucky we were not caught.
And then, of course, you and your sister, Rachel, would be hidden separately in several different places while your parents were hiding together over the next year until your sister, Rachel, joined your parents in Amsterdam and you went to the Onderweegs. Tell us about that year of going to several different places. Tell us what you can about that?
Well, I was in one place where I was not treated right. The people made me make envelopes, which will sound funny to you now, but 80 years ago, envelopes were not made by machines. They were printed, and then they had to be folded and pasted in order to become envelopes. So the people made me do that. They didn't treat me as part of the family, so I was very unhappy there. That was one place. But at one time, I got so angry that I sounded off, and my father thought he had to come and straighten me out that I couldn't sound off with these people. But I begged him to take me to my mother. I hadn't seen her in 6 months. And he did. And then when I was with my parents, I told them how I was being treated. And they decided I should go back to the place. They would find out a hiding place for.
And I think, was it the next hiding place where you were actually betrayed? Was this the home of Atan and Lemmer?
No, that was the hiding place before that.
The hiding place before that.
Yeah, I was there about 2 or 3 weeks, and the police came and said, you know, the neighbors have turned you in, they've heard your voice, or maybe they've heard your conversation, but anyhow, we will help you to get away if you had a place to go. And I said, well, I know where my parents are, but don't you take me back? I was quite a ways from Amsterdam, but why don't you travel with me? Or they offered. So they came the next morning, early in the morning. It was in December, it was dark, and they made enough noise so that the neighbors knew that they followed up on that tip to arrest me. And then they took me to the railroad station and they helped me to travel to Amsterdam. And I went back to my parents.
And one of the policemen actually traveled with you at that time and accompanied you to Amsterdam.
Yeah, because, you know, I was 13 years old, and I would have been somewhat, if the Germans had come to control, then there would have been some suspicion. You know, what does a kid do alone, sitting in the corner in the train? And so, having a policeman with me with papers that said he had arrested him, was a security.
And from there, you would, I believe, go to live in a family that had 3 girls where you would stay for 6 months in 1943. Tell us about that time. What do you remember of that?
Well, those are the people who were not very nice to me that I talked about who maybe made envelopes.
Same people.
Yeah.
When you moved there, the move to their home, if I remember right, was on January 1st. And that was very deliberately chosen, right?
Yes, because Germans did have controls on the train. And we figured that on New Year's Day, they would have had such a good New Year's Eve party, they wouldn't bother. And you were absolutely right.
So that was a good day to make the move.
It was a good day to travel.
In early January 1944 is when you moved to the home of the Onder-Vague family, with whom you would remain until the war was over and after the war. That was a long period of time. Tell us about your time with the Onder-Vagues. What was that like for you?
They were an exceptional family. Mrs. Onderweegs looked upon it as if she had the task to replace the mother until the war was over, so that the child would go back to the mother. So she was very, very warm, nice people. They were very active in the underground. They helped about 33 Jewish people to find hiding places. But in the first 6 months, and then they were betrayed and they had to go into hiding.
The Onderweegs had
Yes.
to go into hiding.
So
When they went into hiding, what did that mean for you?
Mr. Onderweegs had gone to meet my parents for 2 reasons. He wanted to make sure nobody was taking money from them from me, because he wanted to pay out of his own pocket. Mm-hmm. The other reason was that he wanted to see if he couldn't find some way that we could correspond. My parents could have contact with me. Mm-hmm. And so he told them there, at that time, as I was told later by family, if ever something happens to you, don't worry, I will take care of Louis as of my own child. So, but my parents had been arrested, but we found out about pretty soon. He felt that he had made his commitment and he should follow through on it. Mm-hmm. So when he had to go into hiding, there was no question I was going with him.
Mm-hmm. You, as you said, they were a remarkable family.
Yeah.
And your point that Mrs. Onderweegs took the responsibility of being a substitute for your mother until you could go back to your mother, as opposed to she was just hiding a child. Yeah. You also told me that when you first went there, the intent was not for you to hide there, it was to possibly go live on a farm.
That's right. They had committed to take care of a Jewish baby who came about 3 days after I was there. And when I was there, I came there in order to go for Miss Onderweegs to find me a place at a farm, so I could help the farmer. But I was somewhat under nurse, and Mrs. Onderweegs thought that the farmer would send me back, and that Miss Onderweegs would lose his reputation by sending him another nurse kid who couldn't lift 5 pounds of potatoes. So she kept telling him. And after a few days, he finally gave in. He said, all right, he can stay.
What they did in the resistance was extraordinary.
Yeah.
And before long, you were helping out.
And that's right.
Tell us what you did.
Well, Mr. Onderweegs was the town clerk. That meant he was in charge of all the administrative areas, and therefore he had access to ID cards. Now, an ID card at that time had to have some backing. So if somebody died, Mr. Onderweegs would revive them so he could make an ID card out of it. So having these kind of certainties, but the card was being checked, was very important. So many times the ID cards were prepared at home, and I was allowed to help him. One of the important things was that the ID card had a picture with a stamp on it. And the stamp was part of the picture and part of the card itself. And so if you moved the picture and put a new one in, you had to make sure that that part of the stamp that was on the old picture showed up on the new picture. And we learned to do that with an egg. When you peel an egg, it has what is it?
Skin. Kind of skin on it.
A skin on it?
Yeah, kind of a skin.
Okay.
That skin, if you roll it over the stamp, will pick up the stamp. So if you roll it back, You get to sample the new picture.
And so you were doing this as
I learned it, yes.
doing this. In early April 1944, and this was several months after you had gone to the Onderweegs, your parents and your sister were arrested. You were 14 years of age at the time. Tell us when you learned about their arrest and what you knew at that time and how you learned about it.
Well, what I didn't know is, Mr. Onderweegs went to see my parents. My sister Rachel was there, and he offered to find her a hiding place near me. And so he went in April to go and get her, and then he was about 5 days too late to have been arrested. So this was a surprise for me. So when he came back home, Mrs. Onderweegs saw him coming without my sister. And she realized that things had not gone right. And so he came to the house with tears in his eyes. He didn't know how to tell me that my parents had been arrested. So she told me.
How much did they know? Did they know where your parents and Rachel had gone at that time?
Well, yes. He was in Amsterdam. They found out that they were arrested. They were hiding in Amsterdam. And they had his contacts there with the underground. And they found out immediately where my father was being held and where my mother and sister were being held. They were in separate prisons. And so he tried, they tried to get them freed, but it didn't work out.
As we mentioned during the opening of the slide presentation, the officer who came to arrest your parents was actually someone who had known your father, right?
Yes, he played marbles with my father after school.
As a boy?
As a boy.
You shared with me that you learned that your parents and sister had been deported to another country, but that you didn't believe the worst.
No, there's always this hope.
Yeah.
So it was not until 1947 or so that I really found out what had happened to my parents.
We saw earlier that extremely devastating photograph of your mother in the boxcar.
Yeah.
How did that picture come to be?
Well, when they found the film after the war, the film was made, the commander of Westerbork wanted to make a film made that showed how well he treated the people. He didn't know that they would film a transport.
Mm-hmm.
So when they found the film after the war, they found this one shot, and they asked, does anybody recognize any of these women? And I thought that I saw my mother there. Mm-hmm. So they told me, if you come to Holland, come to Westerbork, and we'll show you the actual
The film
frame.
itself?
And so then I recognized her. That was definitely my mother.
So it happened to be filmed at that particular moment
Yeah.
for your mother. You continued, of course, staying with the Onderweegs.
Yes.
You had a false identity, and you stayed with them until the end of the war for the Netherlands, and the end of the war in May of 1945, and then you would stay with them until August of 1946. Tell us what you recall of liberation and what that time was like for you, continuing to live with the Onderweegs, knowing that your parents and sister were gone, although, as you said, you still had hope.
Well, we were, the family Onderweegs and I, we were hiding, and we were warned again that the Germans knew where we were. Mm-hmm. So this time, this was about 6 weeks maybe before the end of the war. We split up. I stayed in town, the family and the baby and the little girl, Bonnet, went to stay in a farm. And they, Mr. and Mrs. Onderweegs, either one of them came every day to check on me. So one evening, or one night, about 1 o'clock, Mr. Onderweegs came and said, get up, get dressed. I said, well, what is happening now? He said, never mind, get dressed. So I got dressed, and he took me to the city hall, and there was a Canadian major with 4 shoulders, and that was my liberation. And interesting enough, he introduced me by my real name, and that was so important to me.
Not by your false identity?
No, that's right.
Yeah.
So that was my liberation. But of course, the yoke fell off my shoulder. But on the other hand, the doubt was there, what happened to my family.
Right.
So it was not exactly a celebration.
Did any of your relatives, you had a very large extended family, did any of them survive?
I had 3 aunts and an uncle who survived.
And that,
I mean, I should say differently. It's an aunt and uncle who were married. So there was a couple that survived, an aunt who lost her husband, and an aunt and uncle who was another couple that survived.
but everybody else was lost.
Everybody else was lost.
You shared with me that, of course, you had missed 2.5 years of school. With the war over, you returned to school. What was that like for you?
Well, I went to school in the area where I had been hiding, and many Jewish children have been hiding there. So the kids in school were very proud to have a Jew in their class, and so the teachers. So they moved me from the first year to the second year, which I didn't deserve. I hadn't been to school 2.5 years, and I didn't have the background for the first year. So at the end of the second year, I got stuck. I just wasn't ready for it.
But you said generally it was like a festival having you there in the school.
It was fun.
You, in the biography that we share with the audience, it mentions that your father, Meyer, had been a very avid videographer, photographer with 8mm film.
Yes.
You were able to get some of that film. Tell us how you did that.
My father had given the films into safekeeping.
And these were films of family events and outings and things like that, yeah.
Like now, everybody takes a picture.
Right. It was rare then, yes.
Yeah. So he had given the films for safekeeping to the photographer, but he bought his films. And the photographer put them in a safe, and when this was in the city of Arnhem, where there was a battle in 1944, and the Germans really stole everything they could, and so they blew open the safe, and they weren't interested in the film. But he found pieces of the film after the war and saved them for me. When I came to Arnhem, he said, I have your family films.
There was enough salvage that you have some family films from that time.
And the films, I gave them here to the museum.
Yeah. In August 1946, more than a year after the war ended, you moved from the Onderweegs to the Jewish Boys Orphanage. What brought about your move to the orphanage?
Religion. No, the family was devout Christian people, and they said to me, you can be a religious Jew or a religious Protestant, but you cannot be an atheist. And I was not ready to really accept another religion. I felt I had suffered for being a Jew, and I was proud to be a Jew. So I decided it was better to go to a Jewish boy orphanage. And we discussed it, and they understood me. And so we always stayed very good friends. As a matter of fact, the family came to visit me in the States.
And in fact, you're hoping that at this very moment, the daughter of the Onderweegs is watching on the internet.
Program.
Yeah, this program today. The time, that was a remarkable time in the orphanage, though, and tell us about that.
Well, most of the boys in the orphanage had similar backgrounds as I. We had lost our parents, so in the camp, and both of them in hiding. So we became an extended family. We knew each other's pain.
Mm-hmm. You said there were some boys who had been survived camps who had come into this orphanage with you?
Yes.
And then, of course, before long, you began to think about going to Palestine to fight for the independence of Israel.
Yes. That was really when the ship, the Exodus, was stopped by the British, and the people were being taken back to Germany to a camp, and they were not gently, the British, in taking them off the ships. I thought it was enough, that these people should have a home, and I decided, I was asked if I would volunteer, and I said, yes, I would. So I fought in the 1948 war to establish the State of Israel.
Tell us a little how you made it from the orphanage from the Netherlands, how you got to Palestine, because that was not easy to do.
No, when we went to France, we trained in the Alps there, and then we had forged documents to get into Palestine. I had a visa for a student to study for a year in Palestine.
And once you arrived, you were with a small group of other Dutch young men. I mean, you're all of 19 years of age, 18 years of age, I think. And so you're with a small group of Dutch men, or young men. Yeah. And how did you fare once you were there? You were formed into sort of a Dutch little company, right?
Well, first we were just spread out. The army, there was no organized army yet.
Yes.
So then they found a lieutenant who was a Dutchman who had come to Israel in the 30s and had been in the British Army during the Second World War. He was an expert in demolitions, so they gave him all the Dutch fellows who came to be his demolition squad. So we became experts in laying mines and in blowing up places.
Mm-hmm. And after the War of Independence, that's when you returned to the Netherlands to go back to school, complete your school.
To go back to school, yeah. I got back into almost the same time that I had left it. So I was able to finish my school, at least with the equivalent of a high school diploma in the States.
And there you are, I think you're in training now to become an air traffic controller, but you pick up and you move to the United States. What made that happen?
I listened to a shortwave radio and I heard Al Jolson entertaining the troops in Korea. And I thought, boy, there's going to be another war. I better go to to the country that won the war. So I left Holland.
Came here, and before long you were drafted.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Yeah. I got a letter from President Truman. I was so proud.
And so once you were drafted, you ended up being sent to Germany. What was that like, to be sent to Germany of all places?
Well, I didn't spend time in Germany. Whenever I had leave, I would either go to Holland, where I still had family, my uncle and aunts, or I would go to Paris, to France, but I would not spend time in Germany at all, except on an American base.
Mm-hmm. Louis, we have time to turn to our audience for some questions today. Before we do, though, if you don't mind, there's one other question I'd like to ask you. You, as I said earlier, you very generously let me read your memoir that you had written, and I was so taken by the love and devotion that you wrote about your wife, Barbara. Will you tell us a little bit about Barbara?
Well, Barbara was exceptional in that she had to replace so many people that I'd lost. Mm-hmm. And she did. So she understood. She my parents and sister were always present with me. And she had to live with that, and she understood that. She accepted it.
She accepted it. I was just so struck by all that you said about her. Well, are you ready to hear some questions from our audience? Okay. And if we hope that you'll have a question, we ask that you go to one of the microphones. There's one in each aisle. We go to the microphone. Try to make your question brief. And I will do my best to repeat it just to make sure that we hear it properly before Louis responds to it. So we invite you to do that. And while we're waiting for somebody who wants to be the first to come up and get us started, I'll continue with a couple of other questions if I can. We saw a photograph earlier about Eva, who had lived for a period with your parents after when they fled Germany. Yeah. You said she survived. Tell us what happened with Eva.
I was told that she became an agricultural architect, and she lived in the northern part of Israel. And she was married, she had children, and she died maybe about 10 years ago.
Had 10 children, if I remember you telling me right. Did you say she had 10 children?
No.
No, okay.
I said, I know she had children.
Okay.
I was told.
Yeah. I think we may have a question here.
Hi, my name is Philip Brenner. Louis, you've told me that when you volunteer as a witness in the museum here, people often ask you if we are living in times in the United States now that remind you of what it was like in Holland during the Holocaust. What is the answer that you give to them?
The question, and of course we try to stay out, as a museum, stay out of anything political, but the question is, when you speak with visitors here at the museum, you are often asked if you feel there are things going on that make you feel like what you experienced earlier, to the extent you're comfortable offering a thought there.
My answer to this always is, I don't like the attack on the press for fake news. I don't like the attack on the judiciary. Mm-hmm. That's how far I go.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much for that, Louis. Thank you. We have a question here.
Good morning. I had a more personal question. If you could give us an idea of your family's history in the Netherlands. How long had you been there? Did you have family in Germany? I was interested in sort of the family background.
Okay, a question about your family's history. How far back had they lived in the Netherlands? And did you have family living elsewhere A little bit about your family background.
From what we have been able to determine is my family goes back on both sides, maternal and paternal, to 1700
To the 1700s.
Yeah.
So centuries living,
Yeah.
centuries living there. Okay, thank you. One of the things that you shared with me about Mrs. Onderweegs is you said she really believed that she was there to stand in for your mother when she wasn't there. You also said that the family just made you feel safe.
Yes.
Yeah, what a profound thing to have gotten from them.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've got another question here.
Hello, Mr. De Groot. I want to thank you so much for your testimony today. I think it's really important for everybody. I want to ask you more about your wife. Was your wife American, or was she a survivor? And a little more about her childhood and where you met her.
A question about your wife. Was she a survivor? Was she an American? And how did you meet her?
She was an American. Her father had lost his family, so she lost her aunts, uncle, and grandparents. How did we meet?
Yeah.
She was on a date with a friend of mine.
Yeah.
But he was okay with it, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I read that. He was okay with it.
We remained friends.
You remain friends. That's for the record. For the record.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You remained in. Oh no, let me go with you, please.
How did you remain hopeful throughout these hard times?
How did you remain hopeful during all that time that you experienced and when you were in hiding?
Well, we listened to the radio secretly, and we heard that the troops were always making advances. It wasn't fast enough, but they were. And so we had hope. And as long as there's hope, there's a possibility for liberation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
All right. How did you finding out about your family's death affect how you think and act?
One more time, please.
How did, Mr. De Groot, how did you act or think differently after you found out that your family was murdered?
How did you feel? What did you feel once you learned what really happened to your parents? What was it that went on for you?
Well, I also still felt hope, I never wanted to really feel that they might have been killed until I was told they
Until
were.
you knew it concretely. Yeah. You've stayed in contact with the Onderweegs family.
Yes.
Tell us what that's been like for you. Tell us what it's been like to stay in touch with the Onderweegs for all these years.
Well, when I was staying with them, I didn't really think about the fact as seriously that they were risking their life to save mine. But now that I'm a little older and I look back on it, I wonder if I would do that.
Yep.
It's really remarkable what these people did. It's about 75 years now since the war ended. 75 years that I have lived. But I wouldn't have without them.
I'm going to turn back to Louis in just a moment to close our program. I want to thank all of you for being with us today. Remind you that we'll have programs each Wednesday and Thursday until August 8th. Our program tomorrow and next week, they will all be live streamed, and all of our programs will be available on the museum's YouTube page. So if you can't come back to one of our programs in person, there'll be other opportunities for you to watch our programs, and Louis will also be posted on the YouTube page. And I think we have time for one final question, since we have a brave soul here.
Sorry it's like late, but I wanted to know what your relationship with your sister was like. Like, were you guys really close, or were you just like were you each other's like best friends?
Say it one more time.
Your like his sister.
Oh.
Were you guys close?
Say a little bit more about your relationship with
Yeah.
your sister, yeah. Talk a little bit more about your relationship with your sister.
I used to fight with her, she would win.
And made sure that you contributed to the fund for birthday presents.
Absolutely, yes.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's our tradition at first person that our first person gets the last word. And so I'm going to turn to Louis to close the program. When he's finished, our photographer Joel is going to come up on the stage and he's going to take a photograph of Louis with you as the background. So we want you to stay for that, if you would, please. Makes a wonderful memento of his program here. And then when Louis is done, he will remain on stage, and we invite anybody who wants to come up here, taking the stairs, anybody who wants to come up here to please do so, to shake his hand, say hi to him, ask him a question. That's okay
Sure.
with you, right, Louis? Okay, with that, Louis, your final thoughts.
My final thoughts are that you got to be tolerant. You have to accept people for what they are. Most people are very good people, and you can't judge them unless you know their character. Not by the way they look, not by the way they dress, not by the way they have their hair. Be tolerant in accepting them. That's really the message I have for you.
Thank you. Thank you.